Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in my last discussion we were trying to understand the Syrian war, and we tried to see what led to this conflict right from 2011. So now today we want to understand what has led to the fall of Assad's regime, and there are many dynamics that I want us to see what has led to the fall of Assad. So if you remember in my previous discussion, we saw that this is not just a normal war. It's a conflict that we can trace down to America and Russia. It's a superpower stuff where two global powers are fighting for a sphere of influence called Syria because it's strategic. And I want us to start looking at the strategic importance of Syria and why these elements, Russia, Iran, Turkey, US, and other Arab nations are all interested in Syria. So number one, we saw Syria is a strategic land where getting to Europe it's easier. So the gas pipe that America wanted to have to get to Europe, they only can construct it via Syria. So Syria is also a strategic importance because for Russia and Iran, because Iran has used Syria as a trade route, number one. So to supply weaponry to the militias that they control, like Hezbollah. So to get to Lebanon, they use Syria. To get to Palestine, they use Syria. So it's a good transport route for Iran. Number one, to supply weaponry to the militias they control. And number two, they also use Syria as an alternative to dodge these Americans' sanctions. So remember, because of that direct confrontation between Iran and America, there are sanctions, and the Iranians' oil and products, they pass through Syria. Actually, Syria has imported millions of gallons of oil from Iran. So Assad has become a good alternative to bypass these sanctions because he offers that trade route and he offers that market to acquire these supplies that Iran has nowhere to sell. Number two, for the Russians, they have two bases there, military bases there. One is a naval base and an air force base. And they have used these two bases to extend the influence across Middle East. They have stationed sophisticated and complex weaponry in Syria, like anti-ballistic missile systems, air defense systems, which have enabled them to protect spheres of influence across Middle East. So even while we had a conflict in Syria, the American allies were always cautious because they knew the Russian air defense systems and ballistic systems are in Syria. So this has always been to the advantage of Russia. They have used Syria as a ground to watch over the Middle East. And now, because of what happened for the Americans in 2019, they didn't achieve the objective, that is to overcome Assad's regime and to have total victory of Assad's regime in Syria. So what they are going to do is to come and re-strategize on how they are going to win this war. And it's going to work. So the first thing they are going to do is to realize that there are key elements that support Assad. And one of them is Iran, because they have one of the most complete militia, the Hezbollah, who were very rough and very thorough in their work, that they made sure Assad didn't fall. So this year, something has happened. And this is where America played a masterclass in approaching this issue. So because of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, I hope we can be able to trace Hamas to Iran, because Hamas is a militia that is controlled by Iran. They are well trained, funded by Iran. The only thing Hamas has done is to become more political, of which they are not just a militia but a political movement. They even have a political party, and actually they controlled vast ground in Palestine. Actually, in politics, they were the leading political party in Palestine, and that's why it has been difficult to eradicate them, because they formed the Palestinian government. There is the other party that is not part of Hamas in Palestine, and there is this Hamas movement, which is also a political party and has leaders who have been legally elected into the government in Palestine. So, because of what happened last year, what you are going to see is that America takes advantage of the situation. These are my assumptions, but there must be a good agreement between Israel and America, because it's because of America that Israel has continued the genocide we see in Gaza. Well funded by America, well protected by America. Even when we go to the UN and you look at their resolution to end the war, without any negotiations, without any terms of negotiations, America has always vetoed against that, and their powers have enabled Israel to continue the war. Because you might think, what will America benefit from this? And this is where you need to see the interests of America at hand. Because Israel, as they continue to wage war, they have provoked Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the war has extended from Gaza Strip in Palestine to Lebanon. The war continues in Lebanon to a point where now we have a ceasefire. But I want you to see the aftermath of that confrontation. Who has become victorious and who has become weak? It's Iran, two militias, Hamas and Hezbollah, who have ended up suffering the most. And actually, this has crippled and weakened Iran. Remember, they fired some missiles to Israel, and Israel vowed to retaliate, and they actually did recently. What happened? They went and destroyed the military stores, the factories that produce these missiles, these rockets, and they crippled Iran militarily to a point where in the next coming year, that's when Iran can actually be able to produce one missile, or they actually cannot continue to become powerful militarily because all their systems have been destroyed. And this is an advantage not just to Israel itself, who claim we did that to avoid a future response by Iran to attack us with missiles again. But you also need to understand that the one who has benefited more from these missiles is Russia, because as Russia continues to wage war with Ukraine, they have exhausted their weaponry, and so currently they have been relying on missile systems, drone systems from Iran. And so by crippling that, Iran is left in a position where they can't defend themselves, they can't supply weaponry to who? To Russia, and they can't also supply weaponry to their militias like Hezbollah. So it was a double blow, and this is where the master trick was, because I don't have direct information to verify whether America was directly involved in financing these rebel groups, but I tend to think there was one Russian media house that tried in Kyiv that tried to associate these militias with the Ukraine officials, that it's Ukraine was behind that. I don't have any verification for that. But one thing for sure, whether America was directly involved or not, I tend to see an involvement, and I'll tell you why. Even if it's an indirect one. Because by crippling Iran, they put Assad into a position where Hezbollah will not help when Assad needs their help. They put Assad in a position where Russia will not help. They have financed and funded the war in Ukraine, which has drained out and weakened Russia. They have financed Israel to wage war with Iran, which has also drained Iran, the only two allies who could have withstood the downfall of Assad's regime. And that's why I'm saying America was involved in the fall of Syria and Assad's regime by indirectly weakening the two enemies who were the two allies of Assad. So weakening Iran and weakening Russia in two different battlefields, one in Lebanon and Palestine, and the other one in Ukraine. The two friends of Assad could not actually help. And that's why when the militias began their takeover, their revolution, Assad was too weak to respond. Assad was too weak to fight back. Because from the word go, he fought back as he received help from Russia and Iran. Now, Iran is weak even to defend herself. Russia is too weak to defend herself. They can't even acquire weaponry from Iran. They are even opting now to go to North Korea and China to acquire help to continue the war in Ukraine. And that's how actually Assad falls. He does not have the friendship he really needed when it mattered. And when you really saw all these militias, all these rebels, all unite together because they see him as a common enemy, he had to flee and seek asylum in Russia, and Putin welcomes him. And this shows Russia's weakness, shows Iranian weakness, because this has changed the dynamics of the Middle East. There is a new world order, if I would call it like that loosely. There are only two powers who are contending for supremacy in the Middle East. One of them was Iran, who looks weak, and the other one was Israel, who now looks powerful and strong. So actually, as we speak, the power that globally influences Middle East now, it's Israel, who is a proxy controlled by US. Before, it was Iran who influenced the area, who was controlled by Russia. So this shows the weakness of Russia when it comes to global power and influence. They have actually lost a sphere they controlled, which was strategic to extend their influence in the Middle East. This has exposed Russia's inability to defend an ally. I'm thinking most of the countries that were directly influenced by Russia are now asking themselves, should we change our alliances? Should we continue supporting this friend who is now vulnerable like we are? Or should we go to the new ally who seems to control the narrative in the world, who has that global influence? So I actually expect to see countries willing and wishing to alliance with the Western Europe, countries like France, join the European Union, alliance and make trade deals with America, because he's now the superpower of the world. This conflict exposes the vulnerability of Russia, a power we thought was on the same level and actually matched the power of America. But now the narrative has changed. We are in a new world order now. We actually need to see, when countries like Georgia, where we see a revolution now, people who want the narrative, the talk of the day, to be joining NATO and the European Union, countries like Sweden, who have just joined NATO, we actually need to have a right interpretation of such events to see that they are doing it because they don't see anything good. They don't see any productivity by making alliances with Russia. Don't forget, some of these countries were neutral. They wanted to be independent. They never wanted to have any associations with the West. Now they are making decisions. Why? It's because someone is weak. Could not even protect an ally. Assad's regime is fallen. It has actually exposed a lot of terrible things. Look at the prisons where people are illegally arrested, unlawfully arrested, tortured, killed, and you'd wonder, all this happened at the watch of Putin. And this discredits Russia, Assad's and his own regime, Iran, for actually the evil things they have always been doing. So I want to stop there. So if you want to continue learning more about the geopolitics of the world, don't forget to comment, subscribe, or like my video. In the next presentation, we are going to discuss more about Ukraine. So, bye.